right, excellent.
There we go.
So we will, you know, for years, we've been doing this since 2006. And for years, people have said, I can't come, can you record it? And we're like, are you crazy? And now with the pandemic, it has just kind of opened up this whole big technology solution for us. And so we are recording them. You can go back in the meetings that we have had all during the pandemic. They're all on all the recordings are on our website. And our website is HAWK, HAWKNCWF, which stands for North Carolina Wildlife Federation, .org. That's our website. So go there and you can see all of our meetings in the last couple of years. And speaking of NCWF, this weekend is one of the benefits of being on the leadership team. If you want to go to the annual meeting in Raleigh, that comes every year the weekend after Labor Day, and the leadership team has the option of going. So just a little incentive if you want a weekend in Raleigh to see. It's a very inspirational evening because it's our annual meeting and it's our awards banquet for conservation heroes around the state. So it's one of my favorite evenings of the year. So
It's a fun time.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun. It's next weekend in Raleigh. You've missed it, unfortunately, this year, but it'll be next year. It's always the weekend right after Labor Day. Whatever weekend that will be next year, I guess the 9th of September. So any other announcements from the leadership team or anybody in the office or the audience have any reminders? I know we've got some Audubon people here. Any announcements of anything going on around town that people need to know about? Nope.
We're gonna have a say it over here so folks on Zoom can hear it. We're gonna have a volunteer cleanup day at Squirrel Lake Park to prepare for our Kids in Nature Day. It's one of the slides that's coming up here in a minute. In fact, there it is. It's the next one after this, or not. This is actually something that's going on right now. Or monarch butterflies.
The monarch butterflies are in town. Yeah, they're here.
The eggs are being laid, and the caterpillars are on milkweed as we speak. So this is migration, and reminding everybody not to rake up all their leaves, because all the other wonderful insects like this guy,
the Luna moth,
that lives in the leaf layer underneath our trees. But there should be a slide. I guess I missed it. Soon. I must have deleted that slide, but that is October the 8th at Squirrel Lake Park is our Kids in Nature Day.
Yeah, I did that one already.
So the week before there'll be a cleanup over at Squirrel Lake Park, just to get the park looking great for all of our attendees. So keep an eye on your email, on our website, our Facebook, and you'll see all the fun stuff to come and help us volunteer for that. I thought there was a slide on it, but
well, I didn't see one. So all right. So I also have a I wanted to, let's see here. Let me find my thing. The Bradford Pear, bring in the Bradford Pear, get a free tree. Is that already happened?
Nope, that's actually happening the weekend after Squirrel Lake Park, the Kids in Nature Day. So part of North Carolina Wildlife Federation, the North Carolina Tree Service, Forestry Service, thank you. Mm-hmm. And I believe NC State are sponsoring a program where if you chop down and murder a Bradford pear,
we don't like Bradford pears.
Very invasive, very detrimental ecologically. Then you can get a native tree. So we're giving away native trees, from dogwoods to pawpaws I saw in the list, to tulip poplars and oak trees are going to be available. Of course, first come, first serve. And that's going to be October the 15th, which is the weekend after our Kids in Nature Day. So again, stay tuned for that. You can already start seeing ads that the North Carolina Wildlife Federation and the Forestry Service have started putting out, but there's not really a whole lot of, it's really more of a save the date kind of a thing, but that's going to happen the weekend after our Kids in Nature Day. And that's actually going to happen right around the corner here at the Methodist United Church.
We need to get something on our website about that too. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be out in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you'll have to bring some proof that you've murdered a Bradford pear. stand there with your leg on it, holding your chainsaw high above your head, you know. Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. Oh, you got. Well, yeah, you already got rid of them a bunch of years ago. Well, if you go ahead and kill one now, now's the right time.
Now's the time. Now's the time to plant trees, because it is fall is the best time to plant trees and shrubs. Most people buy in the spring whenever you got the spring fever and you're ready to get out and work in the garden, but fall is really the best time to plant trees and shrubs. So do that. And then one of the slides that I missed was to get your backyard certified. We need to get as many backyard certified as possible. We're trying to get, the national park across the country with patchwork wildlife habitats all over. So if you haven't already gotten your backyard certified as a wildlife habitat, see one of the leadership team. We can help you, see if your backyard qualifies, and plant native plants. That is the best way to feed the wildlife. And unless you have any other thing, I'm going to get right in. We kept Mary waiting long enough. I'm going to get right into Mary. Somebody's going to have to come in and show me how to do this. But I want to introduce her. I have been a fan of Mary Roach's for years. And Mary, you're going to have to, I'm kind of dating myself, and I might be dating you too. Her articles, I first fell in love with her, I think, in either Parade magazine, or it might have even been in Reader's Digest. I was a huge Reader's Digest, but that's like years ago. Remember that? So I don't want to make myself older, or you, Mary, older. Or if it was Parade and not Reader's Digest. But I'm a fan of her book. I always learn something, and I always am entertained, because she takes what could be a pretty boring subject, or maybe a gross subject, like Stiff, her book about corpses. I don't know if anybody else has read that one, but I really enjoyed that one. So she takes a scientific but a humorous approach to these subject matters. I'm going to read her bio here. She's the author of at least five best-selling works of nonfiction, most recently Grunt, The Curious Science of Humans at War. Her writing has appeared in Outside, National Geographic, the New York Times Magazine, among other publications. Like I say, maybe a Parade and Reader's Digest. So the book that we're going to be talking about tonight, I guess we can talk to her about anything, but the book that I felt was appropriate for this crowd was Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law. What do you do with, and we filled a lot of these questions, and this is going to be one of the questions I'd ask you, Mary. We filled a lot of questions about, how do I keep the snakes out of my bluebird house? And when I found a snake in my bluebird house and he ate my babies, I killed the snake. And we try to help people understand that the snakes have got to eat too, when the snakes are an important part of the ecosystem. And so we don't want to punish wildlife for doing what wildlife are supposed to do. So I really struggle with how to get people to understand that. And Mary, your book was fascinating. It brought up so many questions that I had not thought to ask myself, like the one with the one monk who was like, with the tiger eating the man, who has what do you do? Because which life is more important, right? It was tough. So I found the book fascinating. I can't wait for this evening. So for my first question, I guess for you is why, what fascinated you about this subject, and why did you write this book?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for choosing the book. And I want to thank you all for the work that you do protecting habitat for wildlife. That is such important work. And so thank you for that. And I have a short attention span. So I finish one topic and I just think, that's it, I'm done with that. Where else can I go? And anytime I stumble onto kind of a pocket of science that I wasn't familiar with, that gets me very excited. And I stumbled onto human wildlife conflict. It's kind of a long-winded origin story for this book, but when I realized that there was such a thing as human wildlife conflict, and that there were people whose professions were involved in this, whether they were researchers or bear managers or danger tree faller blasters or human elephant conflict specialists. All these people have these amazing titles. All of it was new to me and fascinating. And so that's when I dove in. That's when I made that choice to dive in.
Excellent, excellent. Of all the information that you found, all the stories that you heard, give us a couple examples for those who, hopefully everybody's read the book, but for those who didn't, what did you find like the most fascinating or the most intriguing?
Yeah, I think what was interesting to me was, I mean, with all of my books, I like to include sometimes, if it's relevant, another cultural perspective. And I spent a fair amount of time in India. And what was interesting about India is that a couple of the animals that are considered nuisance species, the monkey and the elephant in particular, these are also representations of deities in Hinduism. So there's this kind of built-in reverence for these animals. So that is, it's amazing to talk to people. You know, for example, I spent time in the area where they grow a lot of tea, and there's also elephants migrate through there. It's called the elephant corridor, and they come through, and sometimes their wanderings take them through the villages where people grow subsistence crops. And you can imagine, you know, 10 or 15 elephants coming through hungry can wreak a lot of damage on your cauliflower crop. And so they do cause a fair amount of problems for people. But you speak to people, for example, this woman who twice an elephant had knocked down the wall of her bodega where she sold food and grains for the workers at this tea plantation. And I said, do you feel angry? Do you feel these elephants should be killed? And she said, why would you kill a god? We just say namaste, please go away. She had this wonderful, yeah, I mean, I don't know how well that's working for her, but they have this amazing tolerance. And the situation with monkeys is fascinating because people around the temples in New Delhi and in Agra, well, anywhere where there are temples and monkeys, the people kind of give the food almost as an offering. They say, you know, you go inside and you make an offering to the representation of the deity in the temple, and then you come out and you hand some food or candy to the macaques. These are rhesus macaques, and they all hang out outside the temple, and they get up to a lot of mischief. So people want the problem solved. They don't want to be vexed by these animals, but at the same time, they're like, don't touch them, don't harm them. They just want to like somehow magically make it go away, which is very trying for the folks in the wildlife department. The New Delhi government has a whole wildlife department, and it's fascinating. I went and talked to the guy who runs the department, and he's like, this should be the purview of the wildlife department, not the veterinary department. These are wild animals. You should speak to Dr. Ishwar Singh. These are wild animals. So I contact Dr. Ishwar Singh, wildlife department, and he goes, these animals are no longer wild. They're not my problem. So they keep just tossing it back and forth because it's a very vexing problem. And what they're trying to do, well, they do two things. One, they trap and relocate the macaques, but that's tough because nobody there wants the job of monkey catcher. It's got a real stigma attached to it because you're perceived as harming them. Also, the Wildlife Protection Act is quite strict. So one of the other solutions, which is to go around with a bigger monkey to scare away the macaques, that's not allowed because it's not fair to it's illegal because of you're keeping a langur, which is a bigger monkey, in captivity. So then they had hired people to impersonate langurs and go around making, you know, the calls of the langurs, and that lasted for a while. Somebody else was surreptitiously just going around and having langurs urinate on prominent homes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he said, I have 65 langurs urinating on prominent homes because the monkeys like to go to the homes that have a lot of landscaping and trees. because they like to be in trees. So it tends to be upscale neighborhoods that are really getting the brunt of this mischief. But it's a really as an outsider kind of comical scenario, trying to figure out what to do. But fertility control is the thing that they've been researching the most. But just the cross-cultural perspectives were fascinating there. Yeah.
So you said langurs were urinating on these houses, and what is a langur?
It's a bigger monkey, so that and the macaques are scared of them. So if they hear the call of the langur, or they smell that a langur is nearby, or they see a langur, they'll take off. But basically, they'll just take off and go to someone else's backyard. So it's not a terribly effective solution. But yeah, langur is a burlier, bigger, kind of beautiful, with a black face and kind of blondish fur. It's a very striking animal. And so there's some folks who were going around with those animals in captivity and using them to scare away the rhesus monkeys, but that's actually illegal because the langur is they're protected species. Yeah.
Did you, and I know you traveled to, and you can tell us how many countries, but you traveled to many countries in the researching of this book. Are there some countries that are better at this than others?
I think everyone faces a lot of the same dilemmas. The folks in I think New Zealand was interesting because they created a mess of their own. They kind of were responsible for creating their own terrible situation, which was years ago. I know you asked me who's doing it better, and now I'm telling you who's doing it worse.
Well, but that's okay too. Who's doing it? Give us that too.
I mean, they're trying to remedy it right now. But what happened is it's an island nation, and it had its own unique fauna and birds, flightless birds that had no predators. And when the Europeans came, they wanted to bring along some of their own animals to make it seem more familiar to them or to hunt them. One of the things they brought was rabbits. Okay, rabbits tend to multiply quickly. The rabbits caused a big problem because they were eating a lot of the crops and the grazing land. So the people of New Zealand, the European population, were like, well, that didn't work well. Let's bring in some stoats to get rid of the rabbits. So now they're importing stoats from Europe to get rid of the rabbits. Well, the stoats arrived, looked around. They're like, yeah, rabbits, but also those eggs look pretty good. And those birds that don't fly away, what about them? So they just, they were supposed to, they didn't get the memo that they're supposed to be eating the rabbits. And consequently, New Zealand has lost a kind of shocking number that I don't remember of bird and reptile species because of the stoats and weasels that they brought in. Also feral cats. They let a lot of feral cats go out in the rural areas to try to deal with the rabbits. Okay, so now fast forward. Now we've got the country is losing all of its native species and these birds that don't exist anywhere else. And so they've decided culturally that they want to eradicate stoats, possums, rats, stoats, possums, and rats. I think that's all. But they're island-wide, nationwide. They want that. It's called Predator-Free New Zealand 2050. And that's a lot of eradication. That's a lot of aerial dropping of poison. That's a lot of killing. I mean, on the one hand, I understand you don't want to lose all of your native birds. But on the other hand, the poor possums, you brought the possums here, by the way, for the fur trade. They were brought over to establish a fur trade. And the feral cat, and then they're not doing anything about the feral cats because that's too political. So it's like, if you're going to try to solve the problem, you're going to have to deal with your feral cat situation. But everybody's kind of shying away from that. So it's a big mess. It's just a big mess.
It is, it's kind of that, when that, the hubris of man, when we think we can do it better than nature in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of it is, I get it, it's unintended consequences, but,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, it happens over and over, those unknown unknowns, the things that, you think that you've thought it all through. What could go wrong, and there's inevitably something somebody didn't think about. There's also the problem of overlooking some of the benefits of some of these creatures, only focusing on, the economic effects, say, of, blackbirds in the regions of the Dakotas where sunflower seed is grown. You got a lot of people growing bird seed, dealing with birds that want to eat your bird seed. That's going to be a problem. If you grow bird seed, you're going to have a problem with birds. But one of the things I found in my research from looking back over the years is some of the agricultural reports. The USDA, the director of the USDA at one point said the blackbird and these big flocks of blackbirds are the biggest problem for sunflower growers. But way back this was in the 20s or 30s, I forget. And he's like, the blackbird is a decidedly useful species in terms of the insect pests and the weed seeds that it eats. Like, you can see it both ways, it's so anytime you can try to focus on the benefits of these creatures, and also on trying to prevent the problem, like, don't plant your sunflowers near a cattail marsh where they like to roost and nest. That's a bad idea. You try to, the more you understand the behavior of these birds and animals, the better you can be at heading off problems before they begin. I think studying these creatures, so you understand, sometimes these things are seasonal. It's only a problem for a couple months. You don't need a year-round tactic. You can, in the case of the blackbirds, you could plant a cheap appealing crop nearby to kind of draw some of them away. You could try to change. I mean, they've tried to adapt to sunflowers so that they're more tightly packed into the head. I mean, there's all kinds of things, approaches, and the thing that they were doing, which was destroying massive numbers of them, just didn't work. It just didn't make a dent, because there's millions, tens of millions of birds that come through, because the sunflower growing region is right on the migratory route of these blackbirds and grackles and you name it, and they're all like, oh hey, let's stop there for dinner. So it's a problem. Yeah.
Well, and you gave us the kind of the bad example for New Zealand. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is, we're kind of constantly battling education, and that, when you put a birdhouse in your yard or a bird feeder, and then the birds come, that other animals are going to come too. The raccoons are going to come and eat the food, and trying to educate and to mitigate some of the conflict, or have people understand why that happened. You have any examples of really good education? Like a woman that says namaste to the elephant. Who taught her to act like that?
Yeah. Well, in that case, I think it's just the culture and the religion, but yeah, education is so important. With bears as well, a lot of that is just, it's just don't feed wild animals. Birds, bird feeders, it's not just, it's bears too. And people don't understand the consequences. I think if people understood that, what you're doing is going to lead to, you're encouraging these animals to become they get known as a nuisance, and then they get killed. And it's a funny thing. People are funny about feeding wildlife, though. I found, particularly with birds, it's funny. You can explain it to them, and they have to keep doing it. It's almost like a mental illness sometimes. It's like a compulsion. A neighbor who puts out seed on the ground, which attracts, she's got, there's a few birds that are eating it, but there's also she's drawn pigeons and rodents, and it's like she won't stop. You can talk to her and she'll nod and listen. Won't stop. It's weird.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's tough. Education's a tough one. And in compound, and I had a chapter about Aspen, Colorado, which has a big problem with bears getting into garbage and getting accustomed to human sourced food, and then getting, losing their fear of humans, and eventually just kind of opening doors or pulling them off and just going into houses. And then they get, then a trap is set and they get killed. And it's really tough, because partly because that's a community that has a lot of vacation rentals. So lots of times the population that's there, they're coming from out of town and from a place that doesn't have bears. They don't understand the consequences. Nobody bothered to tell them. They don't know how to work the bear resistant containers. I mean, you think it's easy. Or just, use bear resistant garbage containers and you're done. But it's, how do you get the word to the people that need to hear it? Yeah.
Right. Any questions? I feel like I'm monopolizing. Yes, and
I have a question.
sure.
We're talking about bears, but in a wildlife, they used to eat berries, for instance. But what berries are available for the bears?
Go ahead and repeat that so I don't hear it.
So what happens if berries aren't available? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, in wildlife for bears, because they eat
Yeah.
blueberries and all that stuff.
Did
Well,
you hear her, Mary?
Something about what happens if berries aren't available? Is that it?
Yes, right. So if the food isn't available for the wildlife, I guess that's when they start looking for the easy stuff in our garbage cans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, bears, they're omnivores. They can eat lots of different berries and crab apples and nuts. And they have a pretty broad palate. So I would hope that if one kind of berry isn't available, that they'd have something else. But obviously, are you talking about if the habitat is being diminished, there's less for them to eat, I guess it comes down sometimes just to preserving the habitat that has that food, and anytime you're encroaching into their turf, you're presenting them with a simpler option. A garbage pail, particularly, downtown Aspen, where there's restaurants with, food scraps, big piles of food scraps in the dumpsters. The dumpsters don't get locked and the bears are like bonanza, man. It is just like, if you'd have to be crazy not to go down to those alleys and get into that dumpster, once they figure it out, because particularly as, bears at a certain time of year, they're looking for a concentrated source of calories because they're about to hibernate. They're in hyperphagia, it's called. You guys probably know that. And it's, they need 20,000 calories in a day. So they're looking for a big payout. And a dumpster behind a restaurant is a really good payout. And so they're, that's where they're at. I was only there one night and we went out at 3 a.m. and boom, there they were. There's 2 of them, yeah. I don't know if I answered specifically your berry question.
Well, and I think it's pretty, that can apply to a lot of wildlife, and that's part of what the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, what we're about is preserving wildlife in wild places and preserving play. If deer had plenty of places to roam, they wouldn't be in our backyard eating our hostas. If we had more green space, but we keep developing and taking the green space, and we're basically pushing them into our backyard.
Right.
And hostas are delicious, I understand, from the deer.
Yeah.
So, and I had in the researching of the book and your experiences, was there ever a moment when you're like, this is it, this is going to be this is it for me, this is how it ends for Mary Roach, eaten by a tiger or bitten by a snake or anything?
Yeah. I was in the middle Himalaya in India, where unlike in the rest of India, the leopards do actually occasionally prey on people, often children or you know, old people. They're, you know, they're going for easy prey, and it happens once or twice a year, and it's, you know, it's not you know, in other parts of India, you may surprise a leopard, it may jump and then run away. It's not stalking you as prey, but there that happens. And I went for a walk one night in this area that right where a bunch of these killings have happened. And I didn't time things very well, and the sun went down. And so I was walking back along this road where it's the same road where when we drove in, the wildlife researcher from the Wildlife Institute of India, we had drove in and he would be like, right here, 2015, a man is sitting waiting for a bus, he is killed. Right here, an audacious attack in midday, a young woman is, you know, he had narrated this, you know, like chronology of death. And I'm like, oh, it's that time now when the leopards come out, and I'm walking back by myself. So it was a little creepy. It was a little, I mean, I don't think it was seriously, and it was not like there was a leopard. I knew there was a leopard nearby, but it was a little disconcerting.
Right, you didn't know who was watching, right?
You don't know who's watching. It's right. They're pretty stealthy. Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody? And Daniel, are you monitoring online to see if anybody's asking questions? Okay, good. If you can look to see if anybody's got questions, calling it on Zoom.
So we're not supposed to put out bird feeders?
Well, it's not that you're not supposed to put out bird feeders. I don't think that's because your brother would be very upset if he thought you weren't a proponent of bird feeding.
No, I know. I mean, growing up, we always had bird feeders, but they were small. We had this thing called a satellite, and it was really just birds that could access it. I never saw a squirrel get into it. I mean, I think the problem is when you just dump bird seed on the ground, or, you know, when it's large amounts that are easily accessible. I mean, it's great to feed birds, but, and there's so many amazing designs of bird feeders that keep out non-birds. So it isn't that I'm again, it's not like bird feeding in general is a bad thing to do. It's just the way that you go about it.
Yeah,
you have to put.
And I agree with that. And I think, you know, a lot of times, you know, people equate bird feeding with head snakes, and you can mitigate that by, you know, if you buy seed at a Home Depot or Lowe's, you know, there's got a lot of stuff in it that birds don't eat, and they scrape it out on the ground, and even the squirrels may not eat it, but the mice might eat it. So then the mice come. And then when you have mice come, then the snakes are not going to be far behind. So it's kind of a domino effect. So I think that, like she says, making sure you're using good quality feeders to keep other, you know, animals out of it, like squirrels and raccoons, and also making sure that you're buying good seed so it's not accumulating on the ground and attracting something that you didn't intend to attract in the first place.
Right. That's interesting. That the content also matters.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
That's also part of the education that we do. It's just making people understand that it really does matter. It really does matter.
So, how many bird feeders do you pay if you buy them?
Yeah, hummingbird feeder, make connect with yourself, 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. A lot of times raccoons have a sweet tooth, so raccoons will find it at night, and raccoons are easy to deal with. You just bring it in at night, not the feeder, not the raccoon. The feeder in at night. Don't put it on your screen porch, because the screen is not going to stop a raccoon or a squirrel. They'll come right, they'll say, oh, look at this, and they'll just come right through it. So put it inside of the garage or the shed, and then put it out at first light in the morning. So that's the best way to deal with raccoons and even possum for that matter. So,
Mary, are you able to hear when Carol's talking to the room? All right, good. I want to make sure the mic is picking up well.
Yeah, and I'm sure you just heard that incredibly loud motorcycle that just went by.
sorry.
We have a couple of questions over here. Bates asked, Mary, with the feeding of wildlife being largely negative thing, what is your stance on hunters who use bait or hunters who plant food plots, some of which are native plants, to bring in wild game?
Oh, well, you know, I'm not a hunter. I mean, I understand. I'm somebody who lets the slaughterhouse workers do the killing for me. So I don't object to people hunting for, you know, to fill the freezer. You know, there's a certain, but to me, part of it is it feels a little like cheating to me. You know, like it's one thing if you're like a bow hunter and you're going out, and I'm saying this, you know, I'm not a hunter. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but my sense of it is it should be a little more of an even game, you know, rather than just sitting there feeding them, waiting them for them to come and then sitting in a tree and plugging them, which just feels like cheating. That's just my impression.
Yeah, and I think from, if I can talk on behalf of North Carolina National Wildlife Federation, I think we would say the same thing. It's not, that's not sport. When when you're baiting,
Right.
That's not sport. So if it needs to be, it needs to be fair for both. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. And there's something, you know, I've talked to in the course of doing the book, I spoke to people who were these were bow hunters who, you know, talked about how to get close. You have to get close enough to kind of be in range. And it really is a lot of times you go out and you come back empty-handed. It's a real skill, and tracking is also, I mean, the ability to read a landscape and track animal and recognize sign is so impressive to me. You know, that kind of harkens back to the old naturalists and their, you know, these were scientists who just spent weeks and weeks at a time out on the land learning the life cycles and lifestyles of these animals and how to read the landscape. And it's very impressive to me, you know, so, and most of them were hunters. And it's very, very different to me than trophy hunting or baiting. Yeah.
I have another question, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
I think he has some more on.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a couple over here. Yeah, you know, Mary, I think that's why they call it hunting and not catching, I think is the, you know,
Right.
What we've always heard, right?
Yeah, right.
I know a lot of hunters. I'm not one myself, but many folks have had wonderful experiences out in the wild, and they've never even picked up their weapon, whether it be a bow or a gun or whatnot. But truly communing and, like you say, seeing nature and witnessing it wake up at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, as opposed to going in there and harvesting anything out of the woods. Well, Judy has a question about, is there any research to show whether the birds in bluebird houses are killed more often than bluebirds nesting in natural cavities? Carol, do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about, I've never even seen a bluebird. I know we have them here, but I've never even seen one. No, I don't know. Meaning because they're more easily accessed by predators, or what, why?
And I'm not sure what exactly he means by that, but I mean, one of the reasons there's so many bluebirds around now is that we humans did an amazing job saving them, because back in the 60s and 70s and after the big DDT and their populations dropped so much, we also had a boom in construction. So we lost a lot of habitat for bluebirds, and a great call went out among, across the country saying, put up bluebird houses. And bluebird houses went up in fields, they went up in backyards, they went up in businesses, and if bluebirds came back from them, they were dangerously low. I won't say they were on the brink of extinction, but they were in danger of really failing. And so by providing them houses, it has allowed them to bounce back.
Yeah.
I will say this, it's very important that the houses be mounted and installed correctly, and that they be protected so that the bluebirds have a fighting chance. So that means don't put them on trees. Trees, they're very accessible to predation by raccoons and snakes and squirrels when they're on a tree. putting them on a pole and putting a baffle on the pole to help keep pests
Yeah.
out. And
Where-
that being said, I will say it's tough to stop a snake. So you have
Yeah.
to understand.
Where do they nest naturally?
If I guess when before we started putting houses out for them, they would be in a cavity in a tree.
Oh, they're cavity nesters. I see.
Yeah, they're
see.
cavity nesters. So
Oh, so they'd be hidden.
yes,
I
yes.
see. I see. Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
in a backyard situation, and there's also been studies that show that birds in an area where their food is supplemented, and so in the case of bird feeders or feeding them live mealworms, that the broods are more successful. There's a higher production rate on that property, and of course that's going to vary from backyard to backyard. So there is evidence that supplementing their food, at least in the nesting season, can help the survival rate of the chicks.
Right.
But instilling-
There's many species where when the food is more plentiful, they're what's called compensatory reproduction, where you end up with a bigger brood or clutch, or litter, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Nature kind of adjusts. So when times are fat, they take advantage of it, and they'll have not only a better survival rate, but more offspring. I don't know if that's true with bluebirds, but yeah.
Well, I think in general, it probably is probably true, like you say.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Any other questions online, Daniel?
Yeah, there was another one from John and Diane. Mary gave the example of New Zealand as creating a problem for the country's ecology and native species of birds and animals. Can she give an example of a country that is doing a good job of saving native species and creating habitat for them?
No. I don't. There may be one that I didn't stumble onto one. I'm guessing there's probably European countries that are doing a better job of it, but I didn't. I think India, in its own way, is with the work they're doing with wildlife fertility control. They seem, and the fact that they have a very strict wildlife protection. The Wildlife Protection Act is what it's called, and it's pretty effective. I mean, I think it's a culture, combination of legalities and culture. So I think that I was impressed in general. I mean, it's not like they have it all figured out, but it is, I think, partly because of that built-in kind of cultural inclination to treat these creatures more fairly, because there's so many people were talking to me about the number of deities in Hinduism. Like they're like, basil is a deity. Every animal, I'd throw an animal out there and they'd be like, yes, it is the wife of Vishnu. No, well, yes, it is the creature that so and so rides. Like either it's a deity's wife, the creature that the deity is riding. I mean, there's like so many animals feature in the pantheon of deities that I think that your starting point is a lot has a lot more reverence than maybe here in the United States. We come from the early days of go west, conquer this land, manifest destiny, conquer the wilderness. There's kind of a historical zeitgeist of control and dominate, which is very different than what you have in India. And we have made a lot of progress from the 1800s, when there were bounties on every large carnivore and a lot of small ones. Wildlife was viewed as competition or a commodity, whether it was pelts or killing wolves because they're killing your livestock, or they're competing with hunters. So there was a real shift in attitude. But that's kind of our starting point as a nation was not very nice for wildlife. So You know, we've had to kind of overcome that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I struggle with, you know, of course, preference given to the native animals to any country and to any place.
Yeah.
You know, but I think of the like the mess in South Florida with the pythons in the Everglades, and you know, the pythons aren't evil. They didn't consciously invade.
No.
You know, man invented that problem, or we created that problem.
That's right. That's right. And that happens over and over and over. The pet trade, you know, and anytime you bring in, you know, whether it's done, you know, like the mongoose in Hawaii that they brought in the sugarcane fields to kill the rats, but the mongoose and the rat were one's diurnal, one's nocturnal. They never even said hello. You know, that didn't work out. I mean, the cane toads, it's just so many of our problems we've created ourselves. Yeah.
Well, and in the course of writing this book and learning what you've learned, do you see any hope that we are learning our lesson?
I do see reason for hope. I do, like, you know, I look at some of the changes that have happened at Wildlife Services, the USDA. You know, Wildlife Services historically has been the folks that farmers or ranchers call when they're having a problem with predation. And so they, you know, there's the old guard there is much more inclined toward just eliminating the predator. But of late, the culture is kind of shifting. They've hired in, I think it's 12 states. They've doubled the budget for hiring non-lethal specialists, so people who will come in to talk to the rancher or the farmer about ways to prevent the problem, or to, you know, change the grazing pattern, or help them build a safer nighttime enclosure, whatever it is. It's more than lip service. There actually is a budget for it, and that there've been hires in 12 states, I think. So I think if things are shifting there, I mean, that's significant. And there's so many now. There's a number of coexistence, like carnivore coexistence groups that try to bring together people on both sides of the divide. Like you've got ranchers and agriculturalists sitting down with animal welfare people and environmentalists, and not just talking and arguing, but trying to listen to each other and trying to come up with compromises and solutions. So, to do that, you really need a skilled moderator, somebody who's used to dealing with antagonistic groups and to kind of keep them on track and keep things civil. And that is, I think, a really healthy development. And I think just we've come a long way from the early 1900s, you know, that things started to shift in the 60s and 70s. And because of that shift and the start of animal welfare and conservation, these populations have made a tremendous comeback. And that's sort of what's going on now. The populations are healthy, and they're starting to, you know, be conflict between people and animals again. But I think, I do think there's cause for hope. I just think there's enough people like you guys doing really good work and getting the word out and fighting to keep this land available for these animals, which is, you know, I mean, it's all about preventing conflict. You know, human wildlife conflict, once it starts, the solutions aren't great. You know, once you've got animals shifting their behavior, it's very hard to get an animal to change its behavior. It's very hard. Translocation doesn't work that well. Hazing doesn't work that well. What works well is education and prevention, looking at the problem. You know, what can we do up front to lower these statistics and to make the change, you know, in another way. So I do have some hope. Yeah.
Okay, good. And you gave some great stats towards the end of your book about translocation and how it really doesn't work. And we encourage people, before you call that animal control guy, to come out and relocate, you know, taken to the friendly farm somewhere and turn him loose. And do you know off the top of your head some of those numbers? The translocation, just how dismal the.
Yeah, well, it's,
rate is.
I don't, the numbers are in the book and I don't have my book at hand, but it is, oh gosh. What tends to happen is that, you know, if you translate, using the example of bears, if you translocate a bear, if it's already developed that dependence on human source food, it knows how easy it is to get that. It's going to make its way to the first community, human community, and start doing the same thing over again. And that happens a lot. The other problem with translocation is the agency who translocated the animal, if that animal now gets into trouble in the new community and somebody gets mauled, there's a liability issue. So that's also working against translocation, but it's mostly just, it's also just, you know, not the nicest thing to do to an animal. You know, animals figured out where are the food sources, how do I feed my young, where do I stay, you know, you pick it up and drop it into some, first of all, they don't know where that stuff is, but also that you may drop it into another animal's turf. You're not just dropping it into a vacuum. It's an existing ecosystem. And that's, you know, a challenge, not a pleasant challenge for an animal. I mean, I guess you're giving, you know, you could say you're giving it a chance rather than killing it. But it's, you know, just so much better to prevent that bear in the first place from getting, from encouraging it to eat human foods and to, you know, get dependent on that. So I wish I had the statistics still. I did when the book first came out in hardback, I had all that stuff right. It's in the book though.
Yeah, and that's something else good. The soft copy is coming out right now, right?
Yes, it is
So if
out.
you haven't already gotten your book, you can get the soft copy. And you had a question from earlier.
We were talking about mice and the food, the seeds and everything. But now we forgot one bird, the owl. The owl at night looks for mice. And now I'm kind of troubled with what happens with the mice because they kill them. They are reactive and everything. The mice has poison and he goes outside because he's extremely thirsty and then he dies. Now, what's the concept of that? That mice is killed, it's dead, but the owl might spot him. And is there any backlash with that poison with the bird that it might affect the owls? Because I don't see too many owls anymore.
Right. So the question that if for everybody listening online and for you, Mary, was she was talking about we talk about mice and the owls and that relationship with, of course, mice being rodents that people use rodenticide. Then the mouse is clearly not on their hiding game. They're going out, easy prey for an owl. Owl picks it up and secondary rodenticide poisoning.
Yes.
For owls and hawks and things like
Right.
that. So that, of course, being a big issue, thank goodness we still do have a lot of owls in the Charlotte area. Barred owls are our primary owl that we see a lot of. They do very well in urban settings. Unfortunately, there are plenty of examples if you go to the local Carolina Raptor Center with the birds of prey that have been poisoned because they went ahead and, you know, hunted something that was poisoned. So yeah, that's a very big issue.
Yeah, it's a big issue and it goes all the way up the food chain to mountain lions. You find rodenticide, you know, traces of it in even in those large carnivores.
Yeah.
I know that the I think it was condors out west that they're finding lead poisoning, and the lead is from the bullets. So they're ingesting the creature that was shot.
Right.
They're you know, they're not picking, you know, they're not as picky as my daughter when she eats, and they're eating it all, including the lead bullet, which then they get lead poisoning.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have a molar to crack on the bullet. It just goes right down. I know. Yeah, it is a problem all the way up the food chain, up and down the food chain. Yep. Yeah.
Mary,
yeah.
we had one more question, and I
Okay.
think you kind of answered a little bit of it, which was, what do you believe the most pressing problem facing wilderness or wilderness conservation or human-animal cohabitation in the U.S.? And what do you believe the solution? I know you talked about translocation not being a
Right.
solution.
Yeah.
Just out and out killing is not necessarily the solution.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends. Every conflict has its own unique parameters, and so it's kind of hard. I mean, each one has different ways to come at it. But I think if you could say, just generally speaking, one helpful thing would be to protect habitat. Because that's that's the number. But that and education, I guess, are the two sort of broad stroke things that and even just wildlife biology and keeping the doors open to learning about these animals and why they're behaving the way they are, and how the more informed you are, knowledge is power. The more you know about this creature, the more likely maybe you'll come up with a unique way to prevent these conflicts. It's all about preventing them. So that's important. I also, I feel like some of the work being done in fertility control for some of these species, deer and wild horses, like some of that is kind of, seems like it's becoming, it used to be, if you did immunovaccination, there had to be a booster. Well, how you got to round them up again, make sure you got the ones that didn't get boosted first time. It only works on like an island or a very geographically limited area, but now there's some work looking at doing just one shot conferring long-term infertility and in a population, right, part of a population. So that's promising. Yeah.
With just everything, it's you did something wrong. Once you know better, you do better. And so, a big piece that we have always talked about here at, with the National Wildlife Federation and a lot of conservation organizations is food, water, shelter, and a place to raise young. I mean, that's what it takes to certify your yard. And what you talked about is habitat conservation. The big thing is that we all have a piece of habitat. We just need to kind of rewild it. It doesn't have to look wild, doesn't have to look chaotic. Right. It just needs to provide, ecologically the things that you need to provide.
Right. And also I think people just getting people to stop. I mean, there's a sense of people, people see a wild animal and they think this is a problem. I mean, I describe in the book, seeing a roof rat run across my deck and initially think because it's a rat going, rat, and then like a friend of mine said on a hike, was that a problem? And I'm like, it's not a problem. It's not getting in. When we've got possum, skunk, raccoon, squirrels in our backyard. And to me, I welcome it. I'm not feeding them, but I love to see them pass through, and I love to see them on a wildlife camera to try to get people to see that as a positive thing. I think the word pest and nuisance has created this fear, this sense that you got to call someone, they're a problem. It's like, no, they're not. Keep it out of your attic, whatever it is, just and enjoy it. That mindset needs to be more widespread. I don't understand that mindset of, wild animal equals problem. It's this very territorial, don't come in my yard. It's like, why? why wouldn't you enjoy that? Anyway.
Yeah, we had one of our members here, one of our leadership team members, Carol Mallory. She did a critter cam presentation a few months ago at the end of last season, and it's available on our website and all the fun stuff there. But one of the amazing things is just all the critters that she captures on her wildlife camera. So I'm with you on being able to see that and say, that's fantastic that these guys are all using, and they're passing through, they're not,
they're just passing through. Yep. I mean, until I got the wildlife camera, I didn't know how much was going on back there. And it's sort of like tuning into a soap opera, you know, every night I'd run down and I'd see who was doing what, you know, and it's just so much fun. I just hope that people, because you know, I think wildlife cameras, they started out more for hunters or researchers, but I just think the average person with a backyard needs to know what's going on at 3 a.m. It's cool. You know.
Any other questions from here in the group or online?
Yeah, I have to go soon. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, all right. So you didn't answer. You didn't. The beginning when I hope I didn't insult you by saying Reader's Digest. So did I?
No.
Did I? No,
That's right. No, I did. I used to do a humor column for Reader's Digest back in the day, and that column they put together a collection. So that's actually a book that is sold now.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
No. I loved doing that column. It was really fun.
All right. Well, that's nice because I'm like I've been a fan of yours for years, and of course,
Thanks so much.
and a fan of your brother's now. So it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this for us tonight.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Any last words you want to leave us with?
No, I just wanted again just to say thank you for doing this work. You know, I know it's a lot of people are volunteering their time, and you know, if I had a Bradford pear nearby, that's what I'd do tomorrow, is go murder it.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right.
Find a Bradford pear somewhere.
I will. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
You, Mary.
All right. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All right.
you. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Hi, everybody.
Well, wasn't she delightful? Oh my gosh.